In the name of the Father, and Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen.
Good morning, everyone. Happy to see you again. I see quite more people than I did last night, so I don't want to repeat what we discussed last night, but I want you to help me, whoever was here last night, to do a quick review, a quick recap of points that you've learned or something that resonated with you from what we discussed last night. So whoever was here, raise your hand and tell me some gems or some thoughts that you thought were useful and helpful. Yes, sir. But raise your voice. One second. So we can all hear you. Thank you. Go ahead.
Hello? Yeah. So from yesterday, we've learned that we as a society or as a community are, globally speaking, are more into a postmodernist era where we've developed from theism all the way down to the basics to sort of humanism, hedonism, and materialism, which is the worship of the self, worship of money, and pleasures. We've kind of learned that there's the sort of schools of thought belonging to naturalism and postmodernism. Yep. Where atheism goes more into naturalism by the fact that the world is governed by science, and postmodernism is, as I said, governed by the three different things which I've mentioned.
Excellent. That was a beautiful review. Thank you very much. That was very good. Excellent. Yes. Very good. Any other thoughts? Yes.
The aim for us to be as humans is to know God and spread the word of God, or let other people know about God.
Excellent. Our purpose in life. Excellent. What's our purpose in life? To know Him and to make Him known. Excellent. Anyone else? Anything else? Yes, Antonius.
We were shown yesterday by you that this is why it's these things are not as good, because it shows we have no purpose from these other things, and from Christianity is the Christian point is the only way we have purpose, we have moral, and thus why we can find peace in Christianity.
Excellent. Very good. Very good. All right. I forgot to mention that it's an honor to be with you. And with Abuna Bishoy, Abuna Elisha, and Abuna Musa, it's a blessing. Really a blessing to be with you. I wanted to shift from what it means to be human. That was the theme of last night's discussion. We did talk about postmodernism, naturalism, and if you remember the subjects that we discussed initially that deal with the question what it means to be human, I got all your attention when I mentioned some of those subjects. Remember that? When I mentioned abortion, homosexuality, transgenderism, social justice, racial equality, all of these hot button topics were all, they all dealt with anthropological themes, what it means to be a human being. Let's shift to responding to the plague of atheism. The plague, I call it a plague of atheism. Before I begin, I like to define my terms. What is atheism? It's one of two things, and I want you to tell me option one, option two, option A, option B. Is it the lack of belief in God? Or is it the belief that there is no God? Is it one or two? Absolutely, it's two. It is not one. It's a belief system. Atheism is a belief system. Okay? The definition here, according to the dictionary, it's the doctrine of belief that there is no God. So there's a belief system. We'll explore what that means. Here's what John Lennox, one of my favorite apologists and authors. He said, the atheist, there's a misspelling here, the atheist, singular, claim, or it's plural, I guess, the misspelling is in the verb. The atheists claim that they don't have faith. Oh, yes, they do, in their science and the rational intelligibility of the universe. So they do have a belief system. And there are two types of atheists. And I'll tell you what the belief system is in a second. But there are two types of atheists. There's the type that says, I don't have enough evidence for God, passive atheism. The more aggressive type of atheists who say, I do have evidence that God doesn't exist. And what is it usually that they refer to when they say, I have enough evidence? Tell me one thing. Someone who hasn't spoken. Someone who hasn't spoken. So what is the one thing they cling on and they say, I don't believe in God because of this? It's the problem of what? All right, yes. Exactly. The problem of evil and suffering. That's why sociologists and scholars call the problem of evil and suffering the rock of atheism. Sakhrat al-ilhad, the rock of atheism. Here's what they say. If God is so good, if God is so powerful, then he should want to get rid of evil. He should be able to get rid of evil. Evil exists. Explain. Maybe next time we meet, God willing, and I'm inviting myself here. When in a couple of years, next time we meet, we'll discuss the problem of evil and suffering in details and in depth, because I think it's a very relevant subject to discuss. So back to the creed of atheism, back to the creed or the belief system of atheism. What do they believe in? So I put a creed for you that I want to share. Here is a typical atheist. Here's what they say. I believe, this is the creed of faith. I believe there is no God or devil. I believe there's nothing supernatural beyond nature. Nature is all there is. I believe that miracles do not occur. I believe that there is no sin. I believe that the universe is made up of matter and man is also material. I believe that Darwinian evolution explains where we came from. I believe that morals and values are relative to the person or the situation. I believe there's no life after death. This is the creed of faith for a typical atheist. Now, remember the subject is to respond to the plague of atheism. But for me to respond, I must first know what they believe in. That's why I wanted to begin with that. Now let's respond. I will give you some questions to ask atheists and see what type of response you would get back. I have 12 questions. We took 4 questions 2 years ago. So I will go on to take on different questions this time around. But let me review real quick with you. Here are 12 questions. Where did the universe come from? We discussed this last time we met in 2022. Where did humans come from? Is there a designer behind this design in this universe? Who determines right and wrong? Where do ethics and morals come from? Do you have free will or do you not have free will? Are you fatally determined? Do you trust your mind that it leads you to know the truth? What is evil? Explain. What is the value and worth of your life? Does life have meaning, or is it meaningless, as nihilists would say? Where do we go when we die? Do we cease to exist, as atheists claim, or is there life beyond the grave? Do you have a soul, or are you just a machine made up of chemistry, biology, and physics? Do you have total, complete knowledge, absolute knowledge, to know what is seen and what is unseen, the natural and the supernatural? So these are 12 questions. There are a lot more, but I just wanted to give you some 12 questions. Every question will need some time to discuss. As I mentioned, when we met last time, we discussed the first 4. I'll go on to the next 4, and maybe next time we'll get to the last 4 questions. So we'll talk about free will, trusting your mind, what is evil, and the value of your life. These are questions to ask atheists. Let's begin with the first one. Do you have free will? It's a question to ask an atheist. Why? Because according to your belief system as an atheist, we are made up of what? Matter. That's what we're made up of. And we're machines. I mentioned to you last night, Richard Dawkins, as well as Sam Harris, renowned atheists, they coined this expression. Humans are molecules in motion. Basically a bunch of atoms and molecules that are in motion. Or another expression, they would say, humans are moist robots. Moist robots. That's what humans are. Are we? Well, according to your belief system, we are. Which means that our behavior is governed by the laws of physics and chemistry. If we're just machines, then our conduct and behavior is governed by the laws of physics and chemistry. Which means what? We have no free will. We are determined. We're predestined to say what we say and to do what we do. Here is what Stephen, I'll give you some excerpts. Here's what Stephen Hawking, the renowned theoretical physicist and cosmologist, here's what he said. It is hard to imagine how free will can work if our behavior is determined by physical laws. So it seems that we are nothing more than biological machines, and free will is just an illusion. Okay? Here's what Sam Harris said in his famous book, Free Will. Sam Harris is a philosopher, very famous atheist as well, vocal atheist. He said, free will is an illusion. Our wills are simply not of our own making. Thoughts and intentions emerge from background causes of which we are unaware and over which we exert no conscious control. We do not have the freedom we think we have. Let me give you one more quote and I'll begin to respond. Francis Crick, molecular biologist, also another famous atheist. He said, your joys, your sorrows, your memories, your ambitions, your sense of personal identity, and free will are in fact no more than the behavior of a vast assembly of nerve cells and their associated molecules. Now, these are the writings and the thoughts and the schools of thought of atheists, and they spread this kind of ideology. We are machines, like programs, like robot. Now, in the world of AI, here's another subject we can discuss. I'm actually talking about AI and Christianity in a couple of months, and the relationship or the connection, I should say, artificial intelligence and the Christian worldview. Anyways, in the world of AI, this becomes actually more relevant. Are we really machines? Are we chemistry, physics, biology, and all of that? Here's a video. I'm not sure if this will play, but let's see. If it doesn't, I have the transcript. All right, it will play. So let me give you a preface real quick. This is Richard Dawkins. Any of you have not heard of Richard Dawkins? Okay, I think most of you have. Okay, if you haven't heard of Richard Dawkins, especially here in England, I'm sure many of you have. He's the most renowned atheist of our time, the most aggressive, the most vocal, and he is, I wouldn't say he's an atheist. I would say he's an anti-theist. There's a difference between atheist and anti-theist. Anti-theist, he's against the notion of the existence of God. And he has written several books, The God Delusion, River Out of Eden, The Selfish Gene. And he is considered to be the, I shouldn't say the word pope of atheism, the head of atheism. So if you're an atheist, intellectually speaking, intellectual atheist, you always look for what Richard Dawkins says and follow his example. So here is Richard Dawkins speaking about free will. Let's see what he says.
It's a question that I dread, actually, because I don't have a very well thought out view about it. I think that, I have a materialist view of the world. I think that that things are determined in a rational way by antecedent events. And so that commits me to the view that when I think I have free will, when I think that I'm exercising free choice, I'm deluding myself, that my brain states are determined by physical events. And yet that seems to contradict, to go against the very powerful subjective impression that we all have, that we do have free will.
Short and to the point. So he said, if I think I have free will, I am being delusional. We don't have free will. Can't hear it more clear than what he just said. And this is the transcript of his interview. Here are some questions. So this is what they believe in. Here are some questions. Now, moral accountability assumes free will. If we don't have freedom in our choice, why do we have prisoners in the prisons? A question. Because they should say to the judge, it wasn't me. I was programmed to steal. I was programmed to kill. Why should you prosecute me? Do you see? Think about it for a second. Yes, sir.
That those in prisons, especially the point you made, their upbringing and their parents, the social circumstances has affected them. And since they were babies, even in the womb, the behavior of the mother and the behavior of the affected them. Mm-hmm. So they become criminal. Not everyone, but there is a good evidence that it's not just because of their bad morals.
Of course, I agree with you 100%. Especially from a psychological background, I agree with you 100%, but that's not what I'm saying. Yeah. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that regardless of my upbringing, regardless of my childhood trauma, whatever that is, I did not choose to do anything in my life. I am a machine programmed to kill someone. It has nothing to do with childhood upbringing. They're two different things. So even if you've had the most wonderful, wholesome upbringing, I'm still not free to make any choice in life. I'm just using this as an example. And not only that, but as an atheist, how can you condemn anything as immoral? Think about it. How can you say this is immoral? Well, based on what? That's immoral. We are determined to do what we want to do. There's nothing immoral. Here is another question I wanted to ask, and I mentioned that to you last night. Love. How can you test the genuineness of love when it's freely given and when it's freely received? If I were to ask Dr. Dawkins this question, and I mentioned to you this last night, are you married? Yes. Well, can you go tell your wife, honey, I am programmed to love you? Would that be called love? Love cannot be labeled as such unless it is freely given and freely received. So what I'm trying to say is that an atheist can say, yes, I don't believe in free will, but they practice free will in their life. So what they should do, as I told you again last night, is not just to preach what they practice, but practice what they preach, or practice what they preach and preach what they practice. So we don't live our lives as if we are machines and programs or programmed machines. Then why then are you claiming that you don't have free will? Think about it. Why? Why do they go out and say, we are machines without freedom? Because if they said we have free will, the tougher question will follow. Yes, sir. I can't hear you. I can't hear you.
If you don't have free will, then you cannot sin. So,
Excellent. You cannot sin. Excellent. Excellent point. I didn't think about that. That's a good point. But why else? When you say, I have free will, what's the follow-up question? Where did you get that from? Where does freedom of choice come from? If you are a biological machine, then there's got to be something supernatural, metaphysical, that has bestowed upon you that freedom of choice. Well, there's nothing metaphysical. That's why they say we are machines. There's the other question I want to ask. Do you trust your mind? Do you trust your mind? Because according to atheism, the mind evolved from natural selection. And this is what Dawkins again said. Consciousness and cognition are products of evolutionary processes and natural selection. This is what Daniel Dennett said. These are famed atheists. So, do you trust your mind that it points to the truth? The question, تفضل Sabuna.
One of the German scientists, he said when he read about the old Pharaonic civilized and reading and all the studies about the Pharaonic, he said that the mind and consciences is built up with what we read in all of our life. So if you build your conscience and your mind on the Word of God, or based on the Word of God or in the Bible, your way of, I can say the mind is a machine of decision making. So the decision you will make, it will be based on what you study. So I cannot trust 100% in my mind, which I get it from my parents, but I can trust in my mind who is in the presence of God in the time of prayers, and in when I have like reference to each action I do based on the verses of the Bible. So it have to be supported as a reference from the Bible verses.
Excellent. Thank you, Sabuna. Thank you. So the question here, if the mind was developed through the blind material process of evolution, why should it be trusted? It's a simple, intuitive question. Here is what Darwin himself, Charles Darwin, he also had this doubt. He said, with me, the horrid doubt always arises whether the convictions of man's mind, which has been developed from the mind of lower animals, are of any value or at all trustworthy. Would anyone trust in the convictions of a monkey's mind, if there are any convictions in such a mind? This is what he said in letter to Graham. In other words, he said, I don't even trust that my mind is telling me or is reflecting reality to me. Because it's evolving, and it has evolved. And it evolved from blind natural processes. Here is also what J.B.S. Haldane, a physiologist and a geneticist, he said, if my mental processes are determined entirely by the motion of atoms in my brain, listen carefully, if my mental processes are determined wholly by the motion of atoms in my brain, I have no reason to suppose that my beliefs are true. And hence, I have no reason for supposing my brain to be composed of atoms. You see how it becomes almost like circular reasoning. My mind is made up of atoms. I don't trust it. Well, I don't trust that it's made up by atoms. You see? You see the circular reasoning there. All right. The reason why I'm giving you a lot of quotes from experts, because I wanted to explain to you, this is not just an idea I have or some kind of proposition I heard. These are schools of thought that we as Christians need to understand so that we can intellectually respond to. Now, what about me as a Christian? Do I trust my mind? Well, of course I do. Because I am created in the image of a rational being called God. And he was called in John 1:1, in the beginning was the Word, the Logos. What does Logos really mean? Not just word with a capital W. If you study Greek mythology and understand what the term Logos mean, it means what? Yes, sir. Reason, exactly, from logic, reason, truth, reason, fire, logic. That's what the word means in Greek mythology. Number 3, the most interesting of them. So what was the first question? Do you trust, do you have free will? Second question, do you trust your mind? Third question, what is evil? Now, sometimes when I get conversations, civil, gracious, underscore that, gracious conversations with atheists, and they say, we don't believe in your God. I say, why? Here's what they say. Because of all the evil in this world. I am sure you've had encounters like that before. I pause. I don't respond. Because it's important for me as a tactic to respond to the question with a question. That's the Socratic method. I pause and I say, let's define our terms, my friends. What is evil? And I pause. I'm yet to find a logically coherent definition of evil from an atheist. What is evil? And silence. I'll tell you why. St. Augustine, in his book, The City of God, he said, evil has no nature, but the loss of good has received the name evil. And I'll tell you what evil is according to atheists in a second. Evil is not a divine creation, but rather a term created by humanity in our attempt to explain the deprivation of good. So, like death, what is death? Is the loss of life. It doesn't have any ontological attributes. Death is the loss of life, or absence of life. What is darkness? It's the absence of light. What is cold? You say something is cold, or today is cold. How do you measure cold? By the absence of heat. So how do you measure evil? By the absence of good. Now, here's what C.S. Lewis said, explained that. C.S. Lewis, a famed author and apologist, in his book, Mere Christianity, he said, when I was an atheist, my argument against God was that the universe seemed so cruel and unjust. But how had I got this idea of just and unjust? A man doesn't call a line crooked unless he has an idea of a straight line. So, here are my questions. Every judgment, evil, good, bad, ugly, every judgment presupposes some kind of standard. Every judgment presupposes some kind of standard. Now, what is your standard for judging something as evil? That is my question. What is it? What is that standard? How does that work in a universe in which there are no objective moral absolutes? What is your standard? تفضل يا سبونا.
I believe we have to understand very important thing. God make it clear in the beginning of the Bible, in the the first 4 chapters in the book of Genesis. So if we understand that we have that corrupted nature, so the evil come when we be separated from God. When we make all the decision away of him. And I believe that I asked myself many times, why Adam or Eve, they eat from the fruit? And I find no reason. God he gave him an authority in everything. Imagine if you are just get like an invitation to stay in a 7-star hotel and to use all the things, all the features in the hotel, and you just enjoy. But you ask to be a manager, to got all the headache when the manager have it. This is exactly some of not right thinking. So the evil, I believe, that is come from our old nature we inherited from Adam. But I believe that when the opposite way of evil, when we in a spirit of repentance, when we repent, the evil in one word is selfishness. When I thinking about myself in a very selfish and greedy way, that is the evil.
Excellent. Thank you, Tsabuna. So, to answer these questions, I would like an answer that, and here's the most important part of this whole segment. The answer must satisfy the intellectual and the emotional demand of the question. And it should give me a diagnosis and a solution to the problem of evil and suffering. That's all I'm asking for. So when I ask this question to the atheist and I say, what is evil? I say, you must give me two things. A diagnosis. What is it? And more importantly, a solution. A diagnosis and a solution. What is evil? That's why intellectual atheists, they are on record saying there is no evil in this world that we can ontologically, qualitatively measure. And here's what Richard Dawkins, our friend Richard Dawkins, said in his book, River Out of Eden. He said, the universe we observe has precisely the properties we should expect. There is no design, no goal, no evil, and no good. Nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. DNA neither knows nor cares. DNA just is, and we dance to its music. Why did he say, I don't believe in any evil in this world? Because he cannot provide a diagnosis for evil. What is evil? If he says it's the loss of good, well, follow-up question would be, what is good? And where did good come from? And how do you judge good and bad? What is that standard based on which you say good and bad? So, and before I answer the question, how can a loving God, allow all this evil in this world? I would like you to define what is evil in your own terms. Let's listen. I'm giving you, forgive me, a lot of quotes in this talk, just so that I can share the credibility of the source. Here is what Peter Kraft, a professor of philosophy in Boston College, said. Our judgments of good and evil, natural as well as human, presuppose God as the standard. But where does this sense come from? Certainly not from nature. There's nothing about nature. There's nothing just about nature. Nature is only about survival. What, in other words, does it mean for suffering to be unnecessary or wrong? How is that determined? Against what standard? Your private standard means nothing. My private standard means nothing. We can talk meaningfully about suffering being unnecessary or wrong only if we have an underlying belief that a standard of right and wrong objectively exists. And that is, and if that standard really exists, that means there is a God who is putting forth that standard of morality. So, again, the definition of evil. Not only that, But what is the solution of evil? When they tell me, oh, your God is loving and kind and allowing all this evil in this world, I also pause and I say, what about your worldview? What do you provide as the solution of evil? Not just the diagnosis, yes.
Do bad things. Oh, that's fine. I think I'm loud enough.
Go ahead.
So if there's no evil in the world, why do we all as people do bad things, and why do we get punished first?
Exactly. And that is the question.
So why do we all get punished? So if I was to do something bad tomorrow, why would I have to go home and get punished if there's no evil in the world?
Absolutely. That's a great question. That's why I'm saying that it's not a livable thought at all to say that there's no evil in this world. The presence of evil in this world presupposes a God who had put a standard of good and evil. Because as a deviation or deprivation of what things ought to be, there's a deprivation or a deviation that's evil. How do you know what things ought to be, and who put that rule? Things ought to be done this way, the standard. When I deviate from the standard, then it becomes evil. Can you hold off to the questions just until I finish real quick so I can continue with the thoughts, and then we'll get to the questions at the end. Forgive me. So atheists' response to the problem of evil and suffering. Here is their response. Tough luck. Too bad. Oh well. That's life. Blank happens. And then you can go on and on and on and on. That is the response to the problem of evil and suffering. What is the solution? There's no solution to evil and suffering. There's no solution. Well, in my worldview, there is a solution, and that is the cross up there that you see. Fourth and last question, so that we can finish the entire program. What is the value of your life? According to atheism, you are some collocation of cells of protoplasm. You are the blind product of time, matter, and chance. Basically, you came from nothing and you're going nowhere. That is who you are. That's the value and the worth of your life. Here is what some atheists said about the value and meaning of life. Let me share with you some quotes. Richard Dawkins, back to him. He said, "We are survival machines, robots blindly programmed to preserve the selfish molecules known as genes." Here's what Sigmund Freud said, famed atheist as well. "The moment a man questions the meaning and value of life, he is sick, since objectively he does not have any existence." Here's what Bertrand Russell said, "Man is the product of causes. His origin, his hopes and fears and his beliefs are the outcome of accidental collocation of atoms," as I mentioned. Here's what Marvin Minsky said. He's a famed scientist, AI scientist. He said, "Humans are meat machines." Here's what Stephen Jay Gould, a famous evolutionist atheist, said. "We are here because one odd group of fish had a peculiar fin anatomy that could transform into legs for terrestrial creatures." So basically, this is who we are, my friends. According to atheists, what's the value of your life? What's the meaning and worth of your life? Nothing. So here's the question. What is the value of a robot that will end its life and it'll end up being eaten away by rust and will have no purpose, no value, no meaning after they basically finish the lifespan that they have? What is the value? What is the worth? Nothing. So these were 4 questions that I wanted to share with you. Do I have free will? According to atheism, no, we don't. Do we trust our mind? No, we don't, because our mind had come from a blind evolutionary process. Do you know what evil is, and do you provide a solution for evil? Well, evil doesn't really exist. It's an illusion, kind of like Eastern mysticism. Buddhism also believes, by the way, that evil is illusory. So do you believe in evil? Well, yeah, I do believe in evil, but I cannot tell you what it is, and I don't have a solution for it. Do you, do you have any value or worth in your life? Well, I ascribe, as I told you last night, I ascribe that worth and that value to myself. So these are 4 questions that basically in having conversations with atheists, they'll have difficulty giving an intellectual response to. I'll share with you a story. I shared with you that story 2 years ago, but I'll end with that story. Do I have time for a quick story? Okay. So I was on a college campus in the U.S. discussing the existence of God and the relevance of the Christian faith. And forgive me if you heard this before last time I was here. And then a few atheists came to me and they said, we don't believe anything you said because we don't believe in God. I said, okay, let's have a conversation. Remember, what did St. Peter say in 1 Peter 3:15? Always be ready to give a defense. At the very end of the verse, he said, with meekness and fear. Meekness and fear. Okay? And St. Paul also said, in humility, correcting those who are in opposition. So I said, let's have a gracious conversation because we're not here to debate and flex muscles and all that. I said, I have 3 questions for you. Can you provide me answers to these questions? They said, yes. I said, where did the universe come from? It's a very simple question. They paused. And they said, well, cosmologists, those who study the origin of the universe, are working to understand how this universe basically came to be. They couldn't say the Big Bang. That was debunked years ago. Because if they said the Big Bang, where did that come from? Because nothing comes from nothing. Okay, whatever singularity you think about, that's not the case. So even Richard Dawkins himself, you can look this up on YouTube. He was asked this question: where did the universe come from? Guess what he said? Anyone remembers what he said? Aliens created this universe. That's what he said. Aliens. Okay. Now, so they said, we don't know, but eventually we will find out. I said, great. Let me give you another question. Where did the first life come from? Because there's a law in science called the law of biogenesis by Louis Pasteur, who said life can only come from another living source. He didn't invent this law. He discovered a pre-existing law of nature, that life can only come from life. Where did that first life come from? Again, this question was also asked by Richard Dawkins. He said, we're working on it. Eventually, we'll find out. Okay. The third question I asked, I said, how does your mind, not where, how does your mind work? And how did it function to come up with these 2 responses you gave me just a second ago? Because I want to know how that mind works. To an atheist, the word mind is repulsive. They like another word, brain, because it's a physical thing. So they said, well, we don't know how the mind functions. Psychologists and philosophers are studying how the mind works. We don't know. Maybe eventually we'll find out. So they said the word eventually for the 3 questions. Eventually we'll know how the world began. Eventually we'll know how life began. Eventually we'll find out how the mind works. So I paused and I said, my dear friends, it seems to me that you live by faith. And there was silence, very awkward silence, because that word faith is not a very happy word for an atheist. I said, I also live by faith. And I do have logical answers for these questions. Are you interested to listen? And they got up and left. So what I'm trying to say is this. You can claim God doesn't exist for whatever reason, but can you substantiate this belief intellectually? That is my question. That's why last time I was here with you, I made the case in refuting atheism from an intellectual perspective, not from a moral perspective, from an intellectual perspective. This is what I wanted to share with you this morning. I don't think I have a picture that I want to end with. Where is that nice picture? At the very end. Okay, well, 2 pictures. Here's one picture that sums it all. I don't see any evidence for God. That really explains what I mean by atheism. And here's the picture I wanted to end with. One of my favorite sayings. Remember the 3 sayings of His Holiness Pope Shenouda? Anyone remembers? Rabbuna Mawgood, كله للخير ومصيرها تنتهي. So, my dear friends, the reason why I shared this with you, so that we know that we are on the side of truth. You're not waiting for me to tell you that. We're not here to say whether God exists or not. We have experienced God. We've lived with God. Relationally, we know who He is. I am just giving you some equipping so that when you're in conversation with atheists, you know that this worldview is intellectually incoherent. And glory be to God forever. Amen. Yes, sir.
Thank you. So it's me again. Sorry.
No problem.
Okay.
No problem.
So for the first two questions, I felt like it's a bit related to the Bible, or like we still have the same what the atheist said. We still have it in the Bible. I feel like there is still a bit correlation. So I just wanna like to differentiate like what is wrong with them and like what is the difference? Okay, so
Sure.
In the Bible, in Romans 7:19, it said like, for the good that I would,
Yes.
I do not, but the evil which I wouldn't, that I do, which like easily translates that like فأنا لا أفعل الصالح الذي أريده بل أفعل الشر الذي لا أريده.
Yes.
Which I think I felt like it's the same. It's the same because like I can't do what I want to do, which is the same as anyone who have like any addiction. So they don't want this addiction.
Excellent.
Yeah, like from the easiest addiction to the extreme. So they don't want to do this, but they are like, let's say, obligated, or like from their inner, they feel like they will do it anyway if they don't or no.
Excellent.
And the second point, which is like, should I trust my mind? The Bible said also like in Proverbs 3:5, it said like, trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not upon
Your
their
understanding.
own understanding.
Exactly.
Okay, so I felt like, so it's the same. So I shouldn't lean on my mind, which is the same as the atheist said, but like in another perspective. So I just want like to
I love what you
differentiate.
said. I love that you give those references from the scriptures. Thank you. Mina? Ahmed, I'm sorry, you were sitting here last time, I remember. Yeah, sorry, Ahmed. Yes, and just for this first point, forgive me, just for the first point, we have two, actually not two natures. How do you say this? But St. Paul said that we have the old man and the new man in us. When we get baptized, we put on what? The new man, but the old man is still there. You see, what we want to do in our Christian life is what? To take off the old man and manifest the new man. بنقول كده في التسبيحة. اخلعوا الإنسان العتيق والبسوا الجديد الفاخر. مش بنقول كده في التسبيحة. So this is what we want to do. I have the old man. It's a law within me that fights against the new man. But what we need to do is to ask for grace from God. God, give me some grace and help so that I can live according to the new man, not the old man. So that's the struggle. The second point is, you're absolutely right. Why do I not trust my own understanding? Because it's flawed. When we fell in Genesis, when we fell not just spiritually, intellectually and physically. So my mind now has become what? A fallen mind. So I need to trust in the true mind. So thank you for these references. All right. I think Antonius had a question first and I didn't answer. Yes. A question or a comment?
I have two questions, actually.
Two questions. So make them quick.
Yeah. The first one is, I think from what all began, like from the point of evil from atheism, is the point that if God was powerful, then he should have stopped it coming into the world at the point from when it started with Adam and Eve. So I think that's where it started. Do you agree with me?
Do I agree with that God should have stopped?
No, like, do you agree that this all started, like, atheism started from evil, like the point that people, like these atheists, believe that evil is, like, corrupted because, like, and God is not, like, he should have stopped it at the first. So do you think that's how, like, atheists think?
Okay, atheists believe that if there is a God, he should have stopped evil. Yes.
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 And the second point, I heard before something about like a triangle, like evil is at the top, omnibenevolence and omnipotence.
Yes.
And so I can't remember what's the name, but like they believe in that, and they don't. So like they believe that also this is the point of why God shouldn't exist.
Yes. Okay. I will. Very good, Antonius. Now, I'm not going to go into it because I'll leave this for another time we meet. But here is the argument very briefly, according to what you said, Antonius. This is the argument. The first premise, God is all powerful. You Christians say God is all powerful, right? Yes. Yes. He should be able to get rid of evil. Second premise in the argument, God is all loving. Don't you say he's all loving? Yes. Then he should want to get rid of evil. He should be able to. He should want to get rid of evil. Evil exists. Therefore, conclusion according to them, God is not all powerful, nor is he all loving. This is the argument that they hold on to. Now, is this argument logical? Well, for you to study argumentation and the syllogism and the premises and the conclusion, this argument is flawed. I'll explain that if you're interested. I can explain that next time we meet. Yes, sir. تحت أمرك. Back to the free will.
Back to the free will. We have total free will?
Absolutely not. Only God has total, complete freedom. Here is what, I'll tell you what His Holiness Pope Shenouda said to that question. بالعربي قال نحن مخيرين فيما نحن مسيرين فيه. In other words, we have freedom within boundaries and parameters. I was not free to choose my mom and dad. I was not free to choose the place of my birth. I was not free to choose my gender, although that's debatable nowadays. But anyways, you know, I'm not free to choose the color of my eyes, also that's also debatable nowadays. But anyways, so I'm not totally free. Abuna, I'm sorry.
So I have a comment and a question. So first of all, according to what I have experienced when I speak with any atheist, that the problem is that they don't want to face the truth that there is a second life after death. Because if they have free will, then they will give an account on their beliefs or on their deeds, okay? And then if they are not robots, again, they will give an account for their works. Second thing, if there is a definition for the good and the evil, so they will be condemned about their deeds again in the judgment day. And here is a question. How can I convince them that there is a second life after death? It's not according to the Bible.
Excellent. Can I respond in 1 minute?
Yeah.
How can I present the case that there must be life after death? Let me explain. Excellent question. Now, think about it. Every human endeavor in this world must have an element of hope to make this endeavor meaningful. What do I mean? I'll give you examples. You're a student. You study. Let's say no diploma, no graduation. Will you ever want to study? No. Actually, you don't want to study even if there's a diploma. Anyways, so let's say you're going to work. No paycheck, no money, no salary. Would you want to go to work? You go to work hoping, underline that word, hoping that there's something beyond what you're doing for work to make this work meaningful. You're exercising. You're practicing on your team because you're going to compete to win the trophy. There's no trophy. There's no competition. Would you want to practice with the team? No. So every human endeavor in this world, present world, must have an element of hope beyond this particular activity to make this activity meaningful. Now, what about, let me just finish. What about the entire life, which is made up of these little endeavors? Wouldn't the sum total of the parts be also meaningful only if there is something beyond it hoping for you to achieve? It's just philosophical thinking. That's all what I'm asking for. So there must be something beyond this life for it to be meaningful, just like every single activity that we do in this life have something beyond it to be meaningful. That would be the answer to the question. But there was sorry, go ahead. Tfaddal.
I'll take the devil's advocate.
طب مش قدام يعني ممكن maybe one-on-one
All right.
because it's a risk to take the devil's advocate in a group, because this actually may confuse but not clarify.
All right, like the answer of
Unless you have a question yourself, then that's okay. And in my devil's advocate, let's do that one-on-one.
Okay.
I'm sorry, forgive me. From experience, it usually harms more than helps. اتفضل يا أستاذ سبونة.
You had talked a lot about evil, Dawkins. I just want to bring up a point that he made in one of his books.
Yes.
He called the God in the Old Testament genocidal and evil because he not only allowed the Jews but commanded them to kill all the Amalekites, man, woman, children, and animals. And he says this wouldn't be the work of an all-loving God, but genocidal God who acts more as a tribal war chief than a God who's moral.
Excellent. And you mentioned, I love what you said, because the same Richard Dawkins here that said that the universe has no evil. The same Richard Dawkins, the second slide I have is, the same Richard Dawkins said, this is what you just said, in his book, The God Delusion. The God of the Old Testament is arguably the most evil character in all fiction, jealous, unjust, ruthless, vindictive, bloodthirsty, and all of that. So how can you say there's no evil here? Yet you complain that God of the Old Testament is evil. 5 years. The first book, River out of Eden, there's no evil. 5 years later, another book, The God Delusion, God is evil. What happened in those 5 years? Anyways, it's a question for Dawkins. It's an excellent point. Yes, sir. تفضل يا سبونة.
Sorry, but say something related to what Abuna Bishoyi has said, and you perfectly answered about the hope concerning the life after this life. The idea of another life or coming life is not a stranger for us, because even outside of the Bible, if we study the history in different civilizations, for example, the ancient Egypt, they believed in the coming age or the next life. That's why they have the pyramids. And it was completely sufficient for another life they will inherit in the future. And in different civilizations, in different countries also, we will find something it's not it's not similar perfectly, but at least on the same level, expecting something will happen in the other life. The third point, we believe in Jesus Christ. Even if he is not God in their eyes, when they deny his divinity, they can't ignore that he is a great teacher. And they can't find a mistake about him. In his teaching, he mentioned there is another life, or there is a coming life. So, and we believe in him because everything he has said had happened. So we believe in the coming life according to his teaching, according to the civilization and ancient world, according to the Bible and the hope in life. As
excellent.
You said.
Thank you so much. Forgive me, Marish. I would still like to hear what you had to say. Can you please go ahead and say that? I didn't mean to not have you.
It's fine. Like,
please go ahead.
Right. Like, what I was going to say is like Like the atheist, the answer to the atheist is the first 4 points. How was the world created?
Yes.
And to me, that's the only answer. That's enough. Like if he doesn't answer it, that's the end of it. The other things that you say, like our explanation is like, sorry, the atheist explanation is that if there is no God, we have no value, there is no life after this, we have no will.
Free
will. He
will.
will say, yeah, okay, yes, we don't have a will, we are worthless, there is no other life, all this is okay. The fact that our explanation is nicer than his doesn't prove that ours is right. So all these, they don't prove that there is no God. But the first one definitely does. Like, how was the world created? You, scientist, you say nothing is created, nothing is lost. So if the world is there, it means that it has been created. So it is someone who doesn't have this law that can create. So this proves that there is God. But the other feel that, I mean, our explanation is nicer, but it doesn't mean that it is right. That's
Excellent. I see your point and I appreciate it. And you're absolutely right in that the first question is the one that demands the answer. How did this universe come to be? And that's been the question of all questions. That's why several people recently, not several, one and had followers, they've come up with this conclusion that this universe came from nothing. Actually, there's a book called The Universe from Nothing by someone by the name of Lawrence Krauss in Arizona State University in the US. And every atheistic community celebrated this book because now we know where this universe came from. It came from nothing. It's quantum mechanics. And he said, he said some things I don't understand. But of course, this is, it's comical to come up with this response and this answer that the universe came from nothing. Because if you ask philosophers like Friedrich Nietzsche and even Bertrand Russell, they said nothing is what rocks dream about. Nothing is nothing. Nothing is no thing. That's what nothing is. No thing. How can a thing come from a no thing? So it doesn't even make sense. So yeah, the question of all questions is, why is there something rather than nothing? Yes.
They kept calling humans machines and biological machines. All machines made by something. How can they call it that if they think nothing's made it?
You need to come work with me in apologetics. Yes, I like your question. How can you say we are machines and all machines were made up by something? Here's what they say. Physics, chemistry, biology. Where did physics come from? Chemistry and biology? This nature, the universe. And when we die, we become ingredients that will fuel this universe for those who will come after you and I. So you're absolutely right. And think about it. Yes, someone who hasn't spoken. Yes. Faddal, Habib.
You said that evil is the absence of light. Then, for example, the atheist could argue that then why doesn't God remove the devil? The devil is not the absence of God.
Oh, very good. Very good. Because we don't believe in dualism, God of evil and God of good. We believe that the devil is not the absence of God. Is this your question or your comment?
No, I'm asking a question
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot. Okay, I misunderstood you.
Why didn't God, for example, remove the devil if evil will still exist even if the devil does not exist?
How can evil exist even if the devil doesn't exist? I'm not sure if this is a theologically
evil is
accurate.
the absence of light, so it does not need something to create it. So why is the devil still here? Why didn't God remove the devil from the equation?
So why doesn't God just get rid of the devil altogether? Is this your question?
Yeah.
When you meet him, you ask him this question. I really don't have an answer for this question. Here is what I'll tell you. How did evil begin to exist altogether? The devil rebelled against God and wanted to be like God. Now, how did he get this idea that I want to rebel against God? That is a question mark. His Holiness Pope Shenouda in a series of books called Years with People's Questions or something like that. This question was asked. He said, how did he, like we know Adam and Eve were tempted by Satan. Well, who tempted Satan to sin? That's the question we don't have an answer for, because the scriptures is mute on this subject. And when here's a principle for Bible studies. When the Bible is silent on any subject, we should also be silent on that subject, or else we become muftiyin. You know what muftiyin is? Benifti. And we don't want to do that. So some speculations, church fathers said it's within himself that he wanted to become like God, and he took a bunch of angels with him. They became known as the demons. Now, how did that come to be? If you have an answer for that question, let me know. But the Bible doesn't speak bluntly about it. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, with Sabuna or with Sabuna.
I think the same as the devil. There is no one tempted Satan. He was tempted by himself. That's why God came to save the world, the human beings, and he didn't came to save the Satan.
Mm-hmm.
He came because we were tempted by something from the evil. And but for the Satan, he was not tempted by anything. He is like it's his own idea to be against God. This is what His Holiness Pope Shenouda said.
Yes, absolutely. And also, do you think God can get rid of the devil? Of course he can. He said that in John at the very end before his crucifixion. But he doesn't want to. Why? Because he respects freedom. Can God get rid of evil right now? Can he? Of course he can. Would he? No. Because his attributes are absolute. His absolute love does not contradict with his absolute power. His absolute power says, I can get rid of evil if I want to. But that contradicts with his absolute love. Now, what does absolute love mean? If I love you genuinely, perfectly, let's say I love my wife genuinely and perfectly, I must give her the what? Freedom to love me back, or else it wouldn't be love. So because God's love is perfect, he gives you and me freedom to love him back. That's why he respects that freedom, and he says, I don't want to get rid of evil because I respect the freedom of my love to you. However, I will take that evil and transform it into good. What is the worst evil that was ever committed in human history? To crucify an innocent man. When I say innocent man, I say God man here, okay? That was the worst evil. What do Christians call that day? Good Friday. That's crazy. They should say this is the most terrible Friday, but it's Good Friday, because good, the ultimate good, came out of the ultimate evil. And that's what God does. All right. A couple more questions from this side, because we've had many questions on this side. Yes, go ahead first, and then you.
I think a few years back you mentioned that like science and religion don't have to contradict each other. They can coexist together. Like science can support religion, or like either ways.
Yes.
How can we explain it to atheists in that way? Like
excellent. You remember from 2 years ago, I appreciate that. So I'll give you an analogy. A scientist who doesn't believe in the existence of God is like an auto mechanic that works on a car engine that does not believe in the existence of Henry Ford. Think about it. If you're a scientist, what are you working on? This universe, to explain how this universe operates. Where did that come from? That's a question. Another thing, science presupposes a universe that is orderly and rational. Where did that come from? So that's why in famous scientists, and I can name at least 20 very famous scientists, were theists. I can tell you Isaac Newton, Federer, my memory doesn't serve me right now, but I can give you a list of very famous scientists who actually were theists. Not only that, more scientists who are genuine in their studies in science or research in science, they go into science objectively and genuinely, they end up becoming theists because they realize that science actually is a window to point to the creation of the creator of this universe. So science and God, they do not contradict, also because the author is the same. We have one author. This author has created this universe, and he authored the scriptures, the same author. So he cannot contradict himself. So, and we can say a lot more about science and faith, but there's no contradiction whatsoever. I give you 3 reasons so far. All right, one more. تفضلي. I'm sorry, أخطيت. And then حضرتك.
Why me or anyone accepted any of the theories of the atheist as it is coming from the brain cells of him as
truth.
As you said, that it is made of just molecules or atoms that haphazardly collected and made that mind. Why his mind is thinking that way and I have a mind thinking another way of God. It is a different mind.
Excellent.
Why do accept the thoughts of a mind that made only of molecules, but my thoughts as a Christian, my mind is completely different from his mind.
Excellent. I love your point. I love your point. And if I were to pose this point in a reword your phrase, and that's also something I've mentioned to atheists, is that I ask them, what is my mind made up of? I'm sorry. What is your mind made up of? And they say it's made up of chemistry, biology, and physics. I said, great. What is my mind, according to you, comprised of? Same, physics, biology, and chemistry. I say, great. How did we come up with 2 different conclusions? Because we have the same source. Explain. Excellent point. All right, تفضل حضرتك. أنا أخطيت معلش.
No problem. Okay, so if we go back to the point of love, and you ask Dr. Dawkins about, are you programmed to love your wife? And he answered yes. Okay, and you ask him again, explain, and he explained it from a scientist or from a medical perspective, like it's like some raise of your heartbeat or blood pressure or something medical happen, or something happen in your body that gives you this feeling. So he doesn't believe in love in a way. So how can you answer that?
That's a straw man fallacy, meaning that you did not answer the question. You answered the question about what happens to you when you experience this emotion.
This is his answer. Okay.
His answer is what happens to him when he experiences this emotion. Explain the emotion itself is different.
This is what gives him this emotion.
No.
That's his answer.
Scientifically, that's his answer, but that's not scientifically the case.
I heard it before.
Yes.
Someone.
That's a straw man. So yeah, and he wouldn't answer that question with that response. I guarantee you that. I don't think he would say it's just
I heard it before, not from him, but from someone else.
Yeah. Because there's a difference. Can you measure quantitatively and qualitatively measure love? You can measure, there's, in amusement parks, there's something called love meters. I'm not sure if you've heard any of these. You stand on a meter, you put your hand on it, and your love level is this and love level of that. If they measure your heartbeats and your blood pressure and all of that, it's the consequence of your emotions of love. The actual ontological essence of love is immeasurable. The byproduct of it is measurable, but the actual love itself is not. Just like, can you measure, anyways, let's not beat this to death. Any other comments or questions? You guys have wonderful questions. Yes, sir. Ahmed, I'm sorry, Kareem. Ahmed لسه موجود هناك مش كده؟ Kareem Habib, and then Antonius, and we'll end.
It's just a comment. When you talk about how far they would go to try and explain the theories, and then when you read about, as you said, like quantum physics and strings theory and that all sort of thing, they go into really science fiction, and they're quite happy to say this is science. So they say, based on that, based on quantum physics, there are probably 10 dimensions, and there is an NTU that if you meet, you're all going to kind of nullify each other. And they believe in other worlds. So there's another dimension where there's probably another creatures living in those dimensions or in another universe. But they completely refuse the idea of having a creator and a mind behind all this creation. So they're happy to accept even other forms of life, other dimensions for life, like, life after death. They wouldn't necessarily be against it, but the idea that there is good and evil and they're going to have consequences for what you do in life, in the afterlife, this is totally against it.
Excellent point. To Abuna's point, he mentioned something very, very significant. Why atheists deny the afterlife? Do you know when atheists, not atheists, maybe deists, they refer to God as a higher power? You've heard that expression before? Higher power. Now, why do they specifically say higher power? Because you cannot morally be accountable to an inanimate higher power. But if it's a personal being, then moral accountability will emerge. You see? If it's a personal being, I'm accountable. If it's a higher power, it's some kind of dead brain that is managing this universe. So, excellent point. So, Antonios, تفضل يا أستاذ أبونا. Okay. أبونا بعد كده أنطونيوس, and we'll finish عشان احنا متأخرين. Okay.
I just remember one word Saint Athanasius mentioned when they asked him, what is your evidence about the resurrection of the Lord? It's Saint Athanasius, and I think that he will start to mention a lot of verses from the Bible. But he said very surprised answer. He said, me. What is your evidence about the resurrection of Christ? He said, me. Me, I am. And why? And they asked him, what I want to say, you have to be confident with who you believe. Sometimes the God is invisible. We cannot touch him, we cannot see him. But when you received him in your heart by faith, that the greatest basic, you can build all your life on it. And then you can keep reading the verses of the Bible. It's not only just sentence, is a life. As Jesus said, the words I said is spirit and life. So I wish one day I can say like Saint Athanasius, what is your evidence about God exists? I will say me.
Excellent.
Me.
Excellent. Thank you, Tsabuna. All right, Antonios, and then we'll finish with that.
I have a point and a question at the same time.
Okay.
So my point is, slash question, would you say that the complexity of the universe or anything in the world shows that there must be a designer?
Yes.
Because linking to the watchmakers theory, if a watch is made of complexity, there must be a mind to it.
Right.
And that mind is an image of the highest mind. Would you agree?
Yes, we discussed this actually 2 years ago. It's called the argument from design, the teleological argument. Yes. Excellent point. The question. You said you had a question as well. Yes. Oh, that was the question?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So in closing, I want to thank you for your comments, your questions. This is two-way street. You may learn one thing or two, but I learn a lot more than what you're learning, because I learned from your comments, your questions, your insights. So I appreciate when we have this kind of engaging dialogue. So keep that coming, keep that going. We're going to meet again, God willing, today, and we're going to discuss, actually, it's going to be relevant to you, it's going to be relevant to your question, because we will discuss faith and reason and evidence. What's the connection between faith and reason and evidence and knowledge? So this whole package will be the subject that we will discuss next. And God willing, tomorrow we will discuss how to be bold in your conviction, in your proclamation to your precious faith. Thank you again for your time and your attention.